16, and one will be wondering, rainy season is here for some of the capital projects. What would you suggest that the Buhari government should be doing right now?
Well, I mean, the Nigerian parlance, we say, go hit the ground running. I am not.
But that realistically, in the MDAs and the ministry, bureaucracy, it takes a lot of time too.
Yeah, it does take a lot of time.
Hitting the ground running does, it does not.
It does take a lot of time, but you see, there's something unique about this budget. It is signed in May 2016. The tenure is also May 2017. In other words, it's going to take its complete 12 months. It's not a case of somebody trying to hurry up and prepare another budget by December or January 2015. So whether it's coming late or not, as we said, the president has this body language of going beyond business as normal. He wanted to be thorough. The House also wanted to be thorough. From what we read in the papers, we should say that they are doing something unusual, something in a different way. So I see it work well if that period of 12 months is given. Well, we're going to have skirmishes of problem, like you talk about rainy season, the infrastructure development, but it can be managed.
Okay, let me quickly bring Mr. Akpedeye here. From your own point of view, you are someone who is grounded in the issues of policy, and one would be wondering, okay, I understand that we'll be reconnecting with him shortly, but with what we have on the ground now, the civil service is a very very difficult, in quotes, system when it comes to implementation of budget, which a lot of people fear. The government might have good intentions, but if the system still remains the same in terms of the civil service, who are going to be the ones to carry the burden of implementation on their necks, let's see the problem is.
It is now you begin to understand, perhaps interpret what I mean by it's a policy that implements your budget. What is the specific policy direction of the federal government towards the civil service, towards the military, towards the army, towards education, towards health, towards infrastructure? When these policies are in place, you can then be sure that the ministries, department and agencies will be able to implement very well. But the civil service as it is now, it's not only choked and swallowed by bureaucratic, complications. It is even going to be worse with the TSA, which puts everything on one line, on one face. It is sacrosanct, immutable, cut and dried, and then you find it difficult to get things done on a very fast
note. All right, let's go bring Mr. Akpedeye into this matter. Someone who, as I was saying earlier, policy is one area that you know too well, from my understanding. But with what we have on the ground now, in terms of the implementation plan that we showed earlier on, do you think that is the right track that the Buhari government is on right now?
Joe, good evening. Good to be with you again.
Thank you.
The challenge you have with Nigeria is one of planning. I think the popular plan is that if you don't plan, then the only thing you plan to fail. The intentions might be there, the will might be there to want to do the right things, but have you set up the necessary parameters on which to do right? And the doctor was just mentioning the fact that whether we're putting the cart before the horse. We need to be careful that no matter how much you will to do a process, you must set up the right pedestal for things to work and work rightly. The challenge I see going forward is that we have a civil service which is very bureaucratic, and we have not had a policy on how to deal with them. And in the vein, these are the persons or people who will implement this budget. The budget sounds ambitious, 6.6 trillion. All the parameters that we put in there in terms of what you want to do, looking outside our mainstay, which is oil. But have we put in the roadmap on how to achieve this process? I think that's where the big question is in trying to actualize the budget.
Mr. Akpedeye, of course, it's very noble sometimes when you have a theoretical, like I know that they always say, those days when I was doing my postgraduate, they said, look, you need to match your words with action, in the sense that your research and your theory, you need to match it with practical. The town and the gown comes in the school form. You understand what I'm talking about here. In terms of the theory that is put in the paper of the strategic plan, practically speaking, how will these amount into the perhaps 100% implementation dream of the Buhari government?
Joe, what I can tell you that the budget is very hopeful. It's called the budget of change. I call it the budget of hope. There's no doubt that we find a very, very pragmatic leader who is very well driven to want to do Nigeria well. But he's just one person. And he's not going to implement the total scope of this land budget. Like Dr. rightly pointed out, you need to have a policy direction on how this will work. I think for me, that's the greatest bane, that is the challenge. Have we set up the necessary parameters? Have we set up the necessary structures to ensure that from A to Z, all the issues that you have thought about can come into play? That for us and as a country will be our greatest challenge going forward. We need to wish ourselves well. I think it's one thing to put in paper first what your aspirations are. The 6-point aspirations, they seem great. We now need to think of alternatives to oil because we've seen the doldrums oil can bring us to. We also need to expand our infrastructure. We have been through this meal before. Successive governments have told us basically the same thing. Perhaps the same writers write this budget over and over time. But one of the things you can't take away, if you saw the quagmire that existed in signing this budget, the back and forth, it shows the will of the man driving the process that he wants to do it right. Now, does he have the full soldiers in all fair to achieve this? For me, that's the greatest challenge, and that's where to put the eyes on the ball.
All right, let's take a moment. And when we return, we move slightly away from this national issue to something, well, national, but the politics of Kogi State gets out talking. The Kogi Assembly on pass is our next issue to be discussed on the program. Join us again.